It's amazing that creatures can live such harsh environments. It seems impossible to survive in such conditions if you think about it normally.
What's up, Oliver?
Oh, Emma, I was just watching a TV special about microbes that live in extremely harsh environments.
You mean extremophiles?
Yes, exactly. Extremophiles apparently live in extremely alkaline water or in boiling water close to 100 degrees. I was amazed at the strength of these creatures to survive in such harsh places. I wonder if even past scientists could have predicted that organisms have such strong adaptability.
Indeed, when it was announced that microbes live in environments with strong alkalinity and high temperatures, it caused a shockwave among scientists. But Oliver, there are environments thought to be even more impossible for life to exist than those flashy, harsh environments. And recent research has shown that microbes exist in those environments.
What kind of places are harsher for organisms than places with extreme temperatures or strong alkalinity? It sounds interesting. Can you explain in detail?
Sure thing. So this time, I'll explain about microbes that live thousands of meters underground from the bottom of the deep sea.
I'm looking forward to it.
Straight off the bat, Oliver, what image do you have when you think of the deep sea?
Well, I have a strong impression of it being a dark and mysterious place. Also, I imagine there are fish with scary faces and mysterious jellyfish.
Indeed, that image could be considered accurate. But if you ask the same question to a biologist, many would probably say that the deep sea is a harsh environment where energy is depleted.
What do you mean by that? I can kind of imagine what a harsh environment means, but I don't quite understand the part about low energy.
I'll explain it in order. It is known that the energy used by almost all organisms living on Earth, if traced back, comes from light energy from the sun. Plants live by converting the light energy from sunlight into chemical energy through photosynthesis, and animals indirectly absorb light energy from the sun by eating plants that store nutrients through photosynthesis or by preying on herbivores. Similarly, almost all microbes can be classified as those that photosynthesize or those that eat microbes that photosynthesize.
So, no matter what kind of creature it is, the energy needed to live is all, if traced back, made from the energy created by photosynthesis with sunlight.
Exactly. This means that it's possible to say that places suitable for life are somewhat bright. In contrast, in the deep sea, generally beyond a depth of 1,000 meters, light hardly reaches at all. Therefore, in the deep sea, because photosynthesis is impossible, it can be said to be a poor environment, where the means to produce the energy necessary for life is scarce.
Indeed, if it's too dark, it's impossible to produce energy through photosynthesis, so the deep sea, where light doesn't reach, seems to be inappropriate for living creatures. But I have a question. There are creatures like deep-sea fish that live in the deep sea, right? How do such creatures replenish their energy?
It is thought that they take in nutrients in two main ways. One is when they use substances like methane and hydrogen sulfide, which spew out from the seabed as a source of nutrition. Methane and hydrogen sulfide are considered relatively easy substances for organisms to extract energy from. Therefore, it is known that organisms like microbes and shellfish, which have the ability to metabolize methane and hydrogen sulfide, live in places where these substances are stably spewing out from the seabed.
So, there are creatures that live off the nutrients that spring up from the seabed.
Yes, that's right.
But aren't places where nutrients spring up so conveniently limited? If methane and such were spewing out everywhere, I feel like all of humanity would be more desperate to mine the resources of the seabed.
You're right, Oliver. The places where nutrients spew out from the seabed are a very small part of the deep sea. That's why most deep sea creatures replenish their energy in other ways. And that method is waiting for the organic matter created by photosynthesis on the ocean surface to fall to the deep sea.
Of course, the shallows and the deep sea are connected, so it's certain that the nutrients produced in the shallows would fall to the seabed. But in the deep sea, which is thousands of meters deep, I feel like most of the nutrients would be eaten before they reach the seabed.
Exactly. In fact, it is known that almost all organic matter is consumed by the time it reaches a depth of 200 meters. Therefore, the creatures living on the seabed of the deep sea, which is several thousand meters deep, are living in an environment that is very deficient in nutrients compared to the surface.
So to sum up, creatures living in the deep sea either live in limited places where nutrients spring up, or they live by waiting for a tiny part of the nutrients made in the shallows to fall down. I think I finally understand what Emma meant when she said at the beginning that the deep sea is a harsh environment lacking nutrients.
I'm glad you got it. Now, the deep sea is nutrient poor, but if you dig down several thousand meters from the seabed, it becomes an environment with almost no nutrient.
Surely, if the deep sea is already low in nutrients, going several thousand meters underground would seem to have almost no substances that could be energy sources.
Therefore, until recently, biologists believed that there could be no life in such a barren environment.
Energy is essential for living, so it certainly seems like it could be called the harshest environment of all.
However, geomicrobiologist Stephen Duant, against the opposition of those around him, used a drilling ship to collect mud from several thousand meters below the seabed of the deep sea to see if there were any microorganisms living there. And to his surprise, he was able to confirm that microorganisms were living mixed in with the mud.
I'm surprised that creatures are living in an environment where nutrients are almost zero. But what on earth are these microorganisms eating to survive? If it's several thousand meters underground from the nutrient-poor deep sea, I feel like the nutrients made by photosynthesis near the water surface wouldn't reach there at all.
To understand the feeding situation of microorganisms living underground in the deep sea, it's best to know how researchers have been observing these microorganisms. So the researchers gave various nutrients to the microorganisms collected from underground in the deep sea and tried to culture them in as many different environments as they could think of. However, for some reason, the microorganisms did not eat the food in any environment and could not be multiplied.
Wait, does that mean the microorganisms living underground in the deep sea don't eat the same things as normal microorganisms?
The researchers thought the same thing as you, Oliver, and decided to investigate the food of the microorganisms living underground in the deep sea in a completely different way.
A completely different way?
Yes. To cut to the chase, they analyzed the genes of the microorganisms. All microorganisms have a metabolic system that takes in nutrients and converts them into energy, and it is known that the type of system varies depending on the food they eat. And since the metabolic system is made based on the blueprint of the genes, it is possible to identify what they eat as food by analyzing the genes.
Certainly, if you check the blueprint of life, the genes, you should be able to figure out what they eat as food. So, as a result of analyzing the genes, what was found to be the food of the microorganisms living underground in the deep sea,
surprisingly, it was found that they eat the very nutrients that the researchers have been giving them as food.
Wait, what does that mean? The researchers, after trying various cultivation conditions as well as types of food, couldn't multiply the microorganisms no matter what they did. So I thought they bet on the possibility that the food was wrong and investigated what they eat using gene analysis. If the reason for the failure of the cultivation was not the food, then what on earth was the cause?
The researchers were very puzzled by this result, and by collecting various data from around the world, they succeeded in calculating a certain amount of the microorganisms living underground in the deep sea.
A certain amount?
Yes, it is the amount of energy that these microbes need in a day. It turns out that microbes living in deep sea environments, thousands of meters underground, where energy is virtually non-existent, survive on a very small amount of energy, 1 zeptojoule per second, or 10 to the power of negative 21 joules. This is an unusually small amount of energy, even among microbes. Essentially, these microbes have evolved to reduce the energy needed for survival to almost zero, adapting to their near nutrient-free environment.
10 to the power of negative 21 joules is so small that it's hard to even imagine. Considering that they wouldn't survive in a nutrient-poor environment if their energy requirements were the same as other organisms, it seems like these deep-sea microbes have evolved quite appropriately.
Exactly.
But what's the connection between the minuscule amount of energy needed for survival and the fact that researchers have failed to cultivate these microbes, if they require less energy for life processes, it seems like they would be easy to cultivate since they can survive in harsh environments.
You might think that because they need less food, they would be robust organisms that are easy to cultivate. However, if you consider it from the perspective of reproduction speed, needing less food can also be a disadvantage.
What do you mean?
Let me explain. Microbes use energy not only for survival, but also for reproduction. This means that to reproduce faster, they need to use more energy. Therefore, typical microbes, when given adequate nutrition, consume a large amount of it and reproduce rapidly.
So, by increasing their numbers, they simply increase the chances of survival, and therefore, when there is a lot of nutrition, they reproduce a lot in order to increase the chances of leaving offspring.
Exactly. And it's this property that is used in microbial cultivation. So, researchers tried to increase the reproduction of these deep-sea microbes by providing them with plenty of food. However, these deep-sea microbes have evolved to greatly reduce their rate of nutrient intake in exchange for energy efficiency in order to adapt to their harsh environment.
So they've adapted to an environment with very little food, and the ability to process a lot of food has been deprioritized and has declined.
Exactly. So even if there's a large amount of food, the microbes collected from the deep sea extract energy needed for reproduction from that food very slowly, resulting in extremely slow reproduction rates and a significantly prolonged cultivation time. That's why researchers couldn't increase the number of microbes, no matter how they changed the cultivation conditions.
So even if researchers create a comfortable environment for the deep-sea microbes, they can't succeed in cultivation because the microbes themselves have lost their reproduction speed.
Exactly.
Wait, does that mean that the cultivation of deep-sea microbes by researchers wasn't a failure, but rather the microbes were indeed reproducing, just at a pace too slow to notice?
You could put it that way. However, in reality, it's believed to take about 1,000 years for these microbes to reproduce once through cell division, so it's fair to say that it's impossible to increase these microbes in a lab.
1,000 years. That's an incredibly long time. It seems like it would be very difficult to research these microbes.
Exactly. Well, I think we'll end it here for now. Thanks for sticking with us till the end. We'll continue explaining interesting science topics like this, so feel free to come back if you're interested.
Subscribing to our channel and giving us a thumbs up would be very encouraging.
Thank you for watching.